webinar number 8, season 2. The leaders, those who are joining this program every month, the number is increasing.
You can go to meeting room.
Request, please, I'll disable the mic. Please unmute your mics. Thank you so much. We have entered into the season 2. We thought, in fact, slowly this program may fade out. But against our expectations, people have picked up like anything. They're also forwarding this link to many leaders. We are so happy to see many more leaders every time and every week. Now this is 108th episodes. Without your contribution and without your participation, I don't think that it is possible for us. Today, we are very proud, and it's my privilege to introduce such a prominent speaker and also powerful writer, author, coach, Mr. Krish Dhanam. It's a very brief profile, but though it is brief, it's very powerful profile. I would like to just read, and it is my again privilege to, I'm honored to read his profile through training, teaching, facilitating, all those areas are all for him as a cakewalk. Krish launched his professional speaking career, and in fact, he has trained directly from Zig Ziglar. He has successfully delivered messages of hope, humor, and balance in all over 75 countries on 6 continents. And understand, let me just mute somebody else, those who are making sound. Yeah. So that you can hear out his introduction. I don't want to miss anyone. He is actually a curriculum designer. He has authored programs on staff development, sales, leadership, personal development, communication. As an author, he has written 6 books. His clients list is a huge. Fortune 500 companies are there in that. The United States Army, Christian Dior, Marriott Hotels, Cadbury, EDS, Texas, Toshiba, PepsiCo. There are many companies. The list is huge. But when I start introducing about him, I know you will be eager to listen to him. I don't want to stand in between you and him. It's Krish, and these are the leaders, in fact, made our company stand number 1 and every critical time. The leaders all across in all functions are attending this program since years. And they are very enthusiastic to learn new concepts and listen to the leaders. And they encourage us to conduct these kind of programs. Over to you, Krish.
Thank you so much for that gracious introduction. And sometimes I wonder when I listen to people reading about me, whether I'm at my funeral and all the good days are over, or whether there's some hope still left. But I just recently celebrated the 40th anniversary of my 20th birthday. So I'm probably closer to the other end of the spectrum than the start. But this journey has taken me about 35 years of a career, 75 countries now. With collaborations, I think I'm up to book number 10. So life goes on. I was just very honored to have received this invite as late as yesterday, I guess, because I happened to be in town. COVID kept me out of the India for for 2 years. And I usually come here more often.
One of the liked it, Krish, you're saying 20th birthday, 40th anniversary.
60, that's how old I am.
Got it. So nice.
One of the programs we authored during the course of the pandemic at the very start was this program called the Architecture of Discipline. The reason for this was the hybrid work models that were created, the leadership crisis that emanated to manage teams, to manage processes, to manage systems, albeit sometimes from distance, sometimes virtually, created a whole bunch of challenges, not in terms of output, but in terms of maintaining the plan in a place that was motivating to the folks. So I want to give you a premise first, and then we'll probably take you down the 4 steps. But just up front, the reason you're not seeing a PowerPoint is many of us have virtual fatigue. So I have orchestrated the PowerPoint that I would have used into a nice 5-page PDF that will be furnished to you all. And as soon as this call is finished, or whenever they send you the recording or give you the access to it, hopefully that will be made available to you by the organizers. And that way you can just sit back, listen to what I have to say. My plan is to talk for about 40, 45 minutes, maybe less than that, maybe not less than 40, and then give you a time for a Q&A with me that will allow us to be able to engage. Now, the premise I want to share with you is the premise of the very word architecture. If you take an architect of any repute, and I brought him to your town, I happen to be right now in the part of Banjara Hills in the shop called Epistles, which is a bookstore that is owned by a friend of mine. I asked him for a nice setting to do this. So as I was driving here, I still saw construction cranes everywhere. I saw construction cranes. I saw buildings that had facades over them. I had repairs going on, which means almost all of these massive things would have had an architect involved in some way at the blueprint level. Now, if I brought an architect of any repute to any one of these construction sites, the architect could look at the hole in the ground and tell me with considerable certainty how tall the building is that would fit in that hole. So the question we ask ourselves as leaders is this: on what is the architect staking his reputation? On what is he gauging his expertise? And the answer is obvious. He's looking at the hole and he's telling you, based on the hole, he can tell you how big the foundation is going to be. And based on the size of the foundation, he with considerable accuracy can tell you how tall the building's going to be. So the whole premise of the architecture of discipline is evaluating our own foundation, because our foundations were eroded during this time. When the COVID attack first began and the corona pandemic began to sweep across the world, I happened to be in the country of Albania. Very quickly, they said they were going to shut down. We had to scramble, get last flights out, and all of you went through that. You went through an immense amount of lockdown, and all of that is past. We have talked about it. But the people who survived were people who were just clinging and grasping. But the people who thrived, hear me carefully, the people who survived were grasping. They were listening to orders and mandates and were working within the systems and the parameters and the gaps that were provided to just survive. But there was a percentage of people who thrived. And these people were the same people apparently who were thriving before. In a book called Top Performance that I had the privilege of authoring with the late, great Zig Ziglar, I made the statement: 97% of the people in this world operate in the comfort zone. 3% of the people in this world operate in the effective zone. The difference between comfort and effectiveness is called growth, and growth is always uncomfortable. And as a result of that, those that wanted to grow during the discomfort found new ways to challenge themselves. Those were afraid of what might come, either because of the fact that they may be afflicted or sidelined or even lose loved ones to this dreaded pandemic, played it safe. Now, I've been fortunate and unfortunate. We lost loved ones through it, but personally, we stayed safe. I traveled all through the pandemic, not because I was daring or because I could. I just found those gaps where I was allowed to go. Within the United States, there were certain states that allowed access quicker than other states. I chose those states to get to. India may have been a different situation, but each geography had its own gaps that allowed us to continue to persevere. So the formula I have for you stands with the letters PLAN, P-L-A-N. The architecture of discipline, a blueprint for achievement, PLAN. The P in our formula, and you'll get this document, the P in our formula stands for preparation is vital. Preparation is vital. The 3 moods I want to offer you in preparation that will happen, and remember this, folks, I'm giving you this advice not as a year construct that we stumbled on, but when this happens again, remember, for the first time in human history, principalities, governments, boards said, go home, lock up, and stay there. And all of the world obliged. Every nation had its own form of a mandate. So the question is not if this happens again. We have proven as a people, 8.2 billion on planet Earth, that the next time we are asked to shut down, lock up, and go home because of whatever reason, we will oblige. We have proven that, we'll do it again. So the question is not if this happens again, the question is when this happens again, what is your plan? The P, preparation, discipline. Sybil Stanton, in her book, The 25-Hour Woman, said, discipline is not on your back needling you with imperatives. That's a negative. Discipline is at your side, encouraging you with incentives. That's a positive. To which I would like to add, the day you make yourself a slave to discipline, the world will become your oyster. So when this new world came in, now let me maybe put an anecdotal reference point. I don't use the word new normal, nor have I ever used it, except to say I have never used it. When this began, on my wall in my office, I wrote in big, bold font, old excellence, now with new possibilities. Think about what I just said. New is scary, normal is average. When someone said this is the new normal, we basically told ourselves and the entire world, we are going to be now ready for new average. Who would want something that is scary and average? Nobody on planet Earth. So I say old excellence with new possibilities. What are some of the disciplines you need? The discipline you need is to be able to get out of your comfort zone into that effective zone. Since I knew that my business was going to be sidelined, I'm a speaker. I travel 100 days a year. I'm doing seminars all over the world, but every place is shut down, which means, like you, I had to get into the virtual space. Now, I'm not afraid of the virtual space because I'd already been doing video and audio as part of a presentation package for years. So I'm not afraid of the camera. But something I realized in the concept of discipline is this. Amateurs became, or at least tried to be professionals as soon as the camera was turned on. Everybody with a camera became an expert. So now I had to ask myself, are you going to compete with all these people who are amateurs acting professional, or are you going to complete the professionalism of what you began? What is my new discipline? First thing I did was change the way my office looked. I changed the way my house looked so that I would not have to compete with the environment. I negotiated with people around the world and told them that I would do something out of discipline that they didn't expect. This is something you have to do for the people you manage, for the people you lead, for your clients, internal and external. You have to go this concept of trying to create a new discipline. So what are some of the disciplines I did for the world universal? For my clients in the Philippines and Singapore and India and South Africa, wherever in the world they were, I looked at their time from Dallas, Texas, and said, why don't we do a session, no charge to you, to encourage your people, to give them new constructs, but I'll do it on your time. They said, what do you mean? I said, your people are already going through a great amount of change. They're already locked up. They're already having a lot of stress. I can't ask them to now jump on a Zoom call at 12 at night because it's convenient for me as the expert. Now, remember what I said when I began this concept of discipline. The very basic premise is realizing this. Amateurs can act professional, but a professional is professional. Amateurs can act that concept. So you put a camera in front of them, you put a script in front of them, suddenly everybody's a hero. But a professional in his very basic nature would say, I'm going to do something out of the ordinary. I'm going to do something out of the extraordinary. So most of these people around the world were surprised that I would come on live at 12 and 1 in the morning. I didn't do that to be a martyr. Leaders should never act like martyrs. Leaders should always be the kind of people who practice what we call fellowship communication. In frivolous communication, level 1, nobody cares you're there. In factual communication, level 2, they just react because you're there. In feeling communication, they respond because you're there. But fellowship communication, they continue to perform because you were once there. These are moments of truth. These are moments of impact. John Maxwell, leadership luminary, said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So in the preparation stage, have a great discipline. Second, have a devotion. And a devotion is self-talk. Now, I have a very unique way in which I prepare for every day, and I'll share it with you. I've been a leader. You are leaders. You've done extraordinarily well during this time. The reports of your organization's success is told about how much you thrived and how well you did and how fast you have grown. So we're all on the same side of the equation in terms of our professional acumen. But our self-talk has to be constantly ahead of the game. We shouldn't be thinking, what can I do and learn today to impact my team? But we should be saying, what can I learn today that will propel my team into tomorrow and force me to learn something new? So when they arrive in tomorrow, I'm already there. That's called future skill attitude. In customer service, we say, don't just sit there to get there, sit there to arrive more informed than anybody else on your team. So every day, even in the virtual world, I made sure that I had learned something new through a devotion to myself, that when I got online, when I got on camera, I was providing them something that gave them an excuse to watch me versus the myriad of other things they were being forced to watch. And the third thing in preparation is dedication. There is no substitute for that dedication, which means we had to have a fixed time. But because we were learning hybrid world, none of us had to get in the car at a certain amount of time or get in the bus or transportation and get to work. Because we were now relegated at the house, our commute was all of 7 seconds. We rolled out of bed and we went downstairs, we switched on the camera, we put our attendance in, and then turned around and made breakfast as soon as the camera was off. So our dedication was there in terms of actually participating, but our dedication was not there in continuity. And I can't stress this enough. When people say, why did you wake up at 1 and 2 in the morning to get dressed? And I told them, I said, when I woke up at 1 and 2 in the morning, I was sleepy. So the first thing I had to do was go wash my face. When I looked at my face in the mirror, I had to realize I had to either wet my hair and put some gel in it and comb it down. The reason is I was getting on camera halfway around the world. Even though the time was odd for me, when they saw me, they needed to see that I was someone who was alert, awake, prepared, and capable. Now, when I put that together, you begin to realize that doing that to yourself at 1 and 2 in the morning, so somewhere halfway around the world, someone believes in your leadership ability, believes in the blueprint that you bring, now begins to start putting the pieces together. So that's the plan. Preparation is vital, discipline, devotion, dedication. And please make sure that you have your questions ready, because when we get into the question and answer time, I would like to answer anything or clarify for you, and make sure you want any question you want to ask. The L in our formula stands for learning. Learning. Now in learning, there are always 3 components, and the learning components are always the source of your knowledge, the course, the flow of that knowledge, and the force. When it comes through you and becomes wisdom, how does it go from that source to course? What are some new ways and new people you have learned from? Part of the blueprint of achievement is asking yourself questions. And one of the books I would recommend is a book actually titled Question Behind the Question. The author's name Miller, the first name skips my mind, but if you're so inclined, please send me an email to info@skylifesuccess.com, info@skylifesuccess.com, SKYLIFE, skylifesuccess.com. Don't worry, I'm not going to send you or sell you anything. But I have a 6-page document that has a lot of my quotes, a lot of the bibliography, and more importantly, a whole robust page on new sources of education and information, from websites and articles and periodicals to books. So if you send an info@skylifesuccess.com saying just request the quotes thing that Krish talked about on our webinar, my office will get that to you. So when you look at learning is critical, source, course, and force, I want to introduce you to a person. I want to introduce you to a person by the name of Strive, Strive, Strive Masiawa. Strive Masiawa was a Zimbabwe engineer, and he had an idea. The idea was to begin to bring. I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Do people have their mics on? Or sorry. So Strive Masiawa was a Zimbabwe engineer who wanted to bring telecom to sub-Saharan Africa. At that time, the PNT license in Zimbabwe was owned, or at least run, by the state. Zimbabwe itself at that time had a dictator by the name of Robert Mugabe. And most of you know that Mugabe is as a dictator, he had one of the worst human rights records, second only to the gentleman who is running North Korea. So it was a harsh place for a person with an idea. Forget COVID, forget pandemic. Here is an engineer with an idea, wants to bring telecom to his country. And at that time, the license for telecom, even though the Constitution allows it to be privatized, is being held hostage. Strive Masiawa sued the government of Zimbabwe. 5-year landmark case. When the case was finally resolved and they ruled in his favor, overnight he went from a person with an idea to becoming one of Zimbabwe's first billionaires. Strive's net worth and his company's total net cap is north of about 3 billion. Strive Masiawa was asked the question by Forbes magazine, which wanted to know about his leadership style and wanted to know about how he created a blueprint for achievement amidst such hostility. And using the L part of our formula learning, I'm going to give you some of Strive's own responses. He said, first principle in learning is to always find a human need and fill it. So in our leadership styles, in our people management styles, in our process management styles, in our marketing styles, in our sales styles, in our finance styles, we have constantly got to be in the search of finding a need and filling it. To use a chemical term, if you want to be effective and have a good blueprint, you have to constantly and every day do what F.W. Borum said. He says the world is a beautiful place, but to belong to it, you should shun the books you would normally read and buy the books you would do anything to shun. So finding a human need is part of that process, thinking like a catalyst. Don't get so emotionally vested in everyday work. Every day, look at yourself and say to yourself, what can I influence in such a way that I will stay objective to the process, and whether I win at it or fail at it, at least I can put my head on the pillow with great confidence and dignity said, I gave it my best. So in learning the source, course, and force, we're using Strive Masiawa as an illustration. One of his first principles was find a human need and fill it. Second, he said, be relentless. Now, one of the things in architecture of discipline is you should never stop digging. And what do I mean by that? Andrew Carnegie, a millionaire, was once asked the question, how do you have so many millionaires working for you? Andrew Carnegie, of course, founder of the Carnegie Foundation and the Carnegie Empire, became from Scotland to the United States broke and became a multi-millionaire. When someone asked him how come he had so many millionaires working for him, Andrew Carnegie said, they were not millionaires when they came to work for me. I made them millionaires. So the question and leadership style always begs, what did he do for them that allowed them to go from just being a worker to someone who was substantial and significant? Carnegie's illustration is almost beyond genius. He says, you develop people the same way you mine for gold. You develop people the same way you mine for gold. When you go into a gold mine, you literally have to move tons of dirt to get an ounce of gold. But the objective of the exercise is never the dirt. The objective of the exercise is always the gold. So finding a human need and filling it, or being relentless, or working hard, or giving back, whichever principle Strive talks about, all are bent on this thing that when you look at what flows, where you get your information, when you look at how it goes through you, and when it looks like it become a force through you, you have to be the one who is relentless. You have to be relentless to a fault. You cannot say, I'm going to quit because I don't know when this is going to end. When the process we have just come through began, nobody expected that for 2 years we would be constantly in that struggle. I've met a lot of people who went through great hardship. I've lost a lot of close ones to that dreaded disease. But the one thing I can tell you without any fear of error is as long as there was breath, and this is the principle, if you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, if you feel a nervous breakdown coming on, the learning is critical to one fault, and that is this. Find someone else with a bigger problem than yours and get involved in solving their problem, and your problem will go away. Part of learning I instructed managers around the world to do is over communicate with your staff. When you're physically present with each of them, it's easy to give them a congratulatory note, a pat on the back, a high five. But when they are apart from you and dealing with problems, and now everything is 24/7, think about it. It was convenience at first. People who had not been together as families could have breakfast together, lunch together, and dinner together, and work somewhere in between. But what happened is that 24/7 seamless effectiveness also lent itself to 24/7 seamless problems. So office problems and home problems were now taking place at the house, and everybody was working seamlessly everybody was struggling seamlessly. So part of this journey of learning, being that constant conduit, asking yourself to be objective to the process, constantly finding new sources of information. Here's a recommendation. If you're still in the hybrid world and you're still at home, if you still are given the luxury of not having had to go back to work, do this. Basically, try to do something new in such a way that big things will begin to change. Even though your commute is 7 seconds, listen to podcasts, listen to information, learn new sources. I downloaded many books on Audible with the goal that I would finish at least one book a week. Because in the reading compendium, when I traveled on planes and all, I was reading on average one book a week, and I did that for 27 years. But when COVID started, I realized that I was sitting in my couch between calls, watching movies with the family, taking picnics, and my reading got away from me. So I said, I'm going to be disciplined to go to a walk every morning, and I'm going to listen to my books on Audible, and I'm going to try to finish one book a week. Now, I have attention deficit of some kind because I can't listen to the same book, or I can't read the same book. Even when I read books, I read at least 3 at any given time, rotated between the genres so that it would keep my attention. Same way I listen. But I do something interesting when I'm on my morning walk and some thought or idea pops into my head that someone just said. I will actually pause, take out my iPhone, open my notes, and type it out. Here's the principle. If you want the learning to work, that source, the course, and the force, practice this. Internalize that which you think is being said to you. Personalize how you would apply it to your own life, and then you'll be able to vocalize it on command. Internalize what is being said to you, personalize it as to how you would live it, and then vocalize it. Level 3, and we're about 25 minutes for those of you who are tracking, so I got another 15 minutes before we'll go to the Q&A. Level in the plan, preparation, learning. The A stands for activity. Activity. Now, activity is an interesting thing. Here, I want to give you 3 words again. All will start with the same letter or have the same rhyme. These words are timely, targeted, and trained. Timely, targeted, and trained. Activity is essential. Remember in the previous segment, we mentioned that when you feel the weight of the world coming on you, find someone else with a bigger problem than yours and get involved in solving their problems. We had a brilliant opportunity, and we will continue to have that opportunity. Many people have lost their livelihood. Many people have lost their ability to feed their families. Many people are struggling. Corporations went through layoffs. Now they're hiring again. There was economic downturn. Where I live in the United States, yesterday, finally, inflation numbers caught up and the stock market tanked. So what is our activity going to be? How can we have timely, targeted, and trained activity so that whichever part of the day you're in, you're doing something for other people? You heard me right. My mentor and hero, Mr. Ziegler, had a philosophy. You can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. But that has to be a philosophy. It cannot be a tactic. Who knows what someone else is going through? I would encourage one of your activities to be this week and going forward. Just pick up your smartphone. All of you in leadership, position, and power probably have north of 250 names at minimum in your directory. Start with the letter A. Pick out the names of about 4 people and write a note to them. Hey, just thinking of you, hope all is well, nothing urgent. These may be people you have had done business dealings with, family, friends. You don't want to send it to the guy who services your air conditioner or fixes your car just because they're in your Rolodex. But for all practical purposes, you have enough people in that familiar and friendly circle who can benefit. I cannot tell you how many weeks I will get a text back from someone that week saying, wow, just what I needed to hear. Timely, targeted, trained. But more importantly, you have to be specific in that measurability. Every week, without fail, on Monday, start with the letter A, go through about 4 or 5 names. Next Monday, do B. By the time you finish the rotation till you get to XYZ, you'll be back ready to go through A, and you'll find other ways to do it. Second, participate in what I call a thank you tree. For this, you may read written activity. Remember, this is called the architecture of discipline, which means you're creating a blueprint for what is going to be built to demonstrate to the world the foundation, the definition, the expansion, and the conclusion of your own career if it were a monument. So the thank you tree is if you get something nice happening or you meet somebody and you had a good business connection with somebody, and as a result of that, you're sure business will improve, or you just met with some new tech specs in the laboratory and you feel that as a result of that, something miraculous can happen in terms of what the organization produces as the next breakthrough, whatever it is. When that first level of introduction takes place, send a thank you to them. But the thank you tree also asks you to send a thank you to the person who introduced them to begin with. So at least 2 levels. I do 3, but I'd encourage you to do 2. Buy some thank you cards. They're very easy to get. Have some custom made with your name on them. Nothing says it better than having the word thank you on a card and your name in some kind of an emboss. Buy them in bulk. I did about 5,000 of them, and I made them generic enough so that they don't get dated by time. It has my company logo. If you want to do it personally, you can. But that's part of activity that will get you out of your comfort zone into your effective zone. Make sure that you always close the loop in communication. When we went to this hybrid world, many people were feeling defeated and deflated because we were not communicating with them as often as we would when we saw them in person. Sometimes when you see them in person, you're reminded of an activity or a task that was due by them and they didn't deliver. And as a result, you send them an email or a text. When you don't see them, you're not reminded. And if it's not critical, you don't send them a text. People were beginning to feel those vast volumes of isolation. I would recommend, if you're a leader, over communicate. So the thank you tree, over communicating, sending out some text messages, whatever it is. Third activity that I think will really help, and I learned this from a gentleman I met at a conference, and he was referencing a great story. In fact, one of the great leadership books I will encourage you to read is a book by the name of Endurance. It's about the life and the journey of Sir Ernest Shackleton, who in the early 1900s, 1914 circa, tried to be the first person to reach the South Pole. He was beaten by a gentleman by the name of Edmundson from Norway, so decided on then doing something else, being the first person to go to one end of the South Pole, the Ross Sea shelf near South America, and go 1,500 kilometers across land with a party and arrive, on the Weddell Sea on South America and arrive at the Ross Sea in New Zealand. But this ship had an ill-fated voyage after it left the coast of South America. Shortly, about 100 kilometers before they were getting ready to dock, the icebergs began to pack around them. And Sir Ernest Shackleton and his team spent about 18 months floating on ice, camping on icebergs, and that's how he kept his team alive. After a while, they even lost the ship where they had been marooned and packed. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with is what has that got to do with leadership and discipline? So Ernest Shackleton did something amazing. He divided his group of 28 people into teams. He made them play soccer on the ice. He made them do things that had nothing to do with survival. He made them participate in activities like giving speeches and doing renditions of poetry and singing that had nothing to do with the task at hand. How does that apply to you and me here? I go back to what my gentleman friend who had given me this piece of advice that he had got, and the reason I shared both stories is important. He said when COVID hit, he said I had about 400 employees. They were in the after death in the death care, or the crematorium and then the funeral home business. They had a huge property where they would bury people. But the state of California said you cannot have anybody at the funeral, the family cannot be there. So it's just the staff doing it, and the entire family is watching the funeral by way of a Zoom. How do you keep a staff motivated? The staff who have to participate in a task and then have to get back and deal with the family. He said, I'm going to do what Sir Ernest Shackleton did. I'm going to have activity that is mundane. I'm going to have them do stuff that has nothing to do with output. So once a week, he would have a Zoom call with his staff. And this Zoom call was done without an agenda. Anybody who wanted to talk can talk. Nobody had to report. And get this, the best part. Family members were welcome. Pets were welcome. Individuals who were watching the call could sit in their pajamas. And as a result of that, this was the Zoom call that actually motivated his people every week. Because once a week, they got together as people where there were no expectations for outcomes, but just a camaraderie to build each other together. The last two principles, the last in our thing is navigation is crucial. So we talked about preparation, we talked about learning, we talked about activity, and now we're looking at navigation. Direction, detour, and destination. Direction, detour, and destination. Now, some of you who have tracked with me so far are probably thinking to yourself, this thing has passed us now. We are now going to pick up the pieces and move on. And you're absolutely right. But my whole premise for preparation, my whole premise for having a blueprint, my whole premise for looking at it as an architect is if the building comes down and the company comes to me and says, I want an identical building built up, I have the blueprint in hand. I know how deep the foundation is. I know what the definition is going to be, and I can move on. So I want you to think like that. We'll have other wins in between. We'll have other losses in between. We'll have successes in between. We'll have failures in between. We'll have promotions and we'll have exits. Life may come back to a quasi-normal and we may parade and go through that. Some may wear masks, some may wear not. Life may go on. But what if the next big thing is not a virus? What if the next big collapse is something that was inflated because of cryptocurrencies that crippled the world's global financial markets? Maybe not something as generic. What if the countries that have lent out money in such large numbers to the poorer economies of the world decide to call in their debt? Right now in the United States, some of the top banks are run by one country. Obviously, if that country decides to call in its note, it can be done. They're all monitored. But what if they do that? Suddenly the markets will begin to economically fluctuate. You and I, my friends, cannot detour a big train. We cannot even derail it. We may have to participate, but we cannot do anything to the grander scheme. All we can do when there is a detour, when the direction takes a different change, when the destinations are altered, is change our arsenal, alter our luggage, understand the destination, and get on board. None of us are going to end up the way we started, but Karl Barth said it brilliantly when he said, none of us can go back and make a brand new beginning. But all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending. So how then shall we put this perspective in place and say, you know what? Going forward, I want to be a leader who understands the architecture of development. I want to have a blueprint for my leadership style where preparation is constant, where the learning that is included in my leadership style is vital, it's critical. I'm not going to learn, so I'm going to be better at my job now. I'm going to learn so that I'm going to be better at my job somewhere down the road. My friends, one thing I learned during the last couple of years is job security is a thing of the past, but employment security is a thing of the future. I met many people in my recent travels who decided that the hybrid life was for them. But what they did was, rather than become hybrid people who would have a dental benefit and a mental benefit working for just one organization, they chose multiple streams of income and multiple streams of imagination. So there's a new reality emerging out there. And that new reality is work will change, its identity will change, its purpose will change. But one thing that will never change is high tech will never replace high touch. There will always have to be some people at the core who decide that that's what they're going to be. They're going to be the person standing, guiding, motivating, leading. So that's the plan. I want to give you a small formula on win, and that should take us to that 42, 43-minute mark, and I'll hand it back at that point. Remember this, you are the enterprise. The WIN should stand for your wisdom should make you always be willing to adapt. Your innovation should give you the ability to adjust. Your wisdom gives you the ability to adapt. Your innovation gives you the ability to adjust. And your networking gives you the ability to affiliate. This is the best time, I believe, to be alive in human history, because we have gone through a grand reset, but we have proven that even through the grand reset, work matters, effort matters, discipline matters, dedication matters. Today, you'll see for sale, for hire signs. I don't know if you have them here as much as we do where I'm living right now. But we came to a point where the economics did not justify the means, so that the government decided to start paying people who were affected by the pandemic and the regulations. The amount of money they were given was X. Corporations historically paid a minimum wage at some of the fast food places and the dining places. When the pandemic ended and people were allowed to come back into the environments, they refused to come back because the money they were getting from the government was more than the money they were going to get from their potential employer. Right now, the status quo says, hey, better off for you. You don't need to work. The government will send you a check. And you know what? Big whoop. But Margaret Thatcher said it best. Socialism is good till you run out of other people's money. One day, someone will come calling, whether it's the person who owns the note for a country. I was in the country of Sri Lanka. Entire downtown, entire waterfront area in Colombo is being funded by a mega conglomerate. It's a $5 billion construction. When that all happens, that part of the world for about 99 years will belong to either the conglomerate or the country. In the short term, the benefit did provide itself. We did get some amount of sustenance. Some amount of money that came in allowed us to participate. But in the long term, if dignity of work is taken away, society collapses. I would encourage all of you to read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, where he chronicles his journey in the death camps of Auschwitz. He talks about how he kept his sanity when he did not know if his family was alive or dead. 21 of his family members perished during the Holocaust. This man, who coined the term logotherapy, the power of words over actions, is part of what they call the third Viennese school, coming after Freud and Adler. But Frankl says it best when he says that the great thought processes of this world do not begin by somebody at a very high level telling you how to think. It's by individuals who have been persecuted so much and defeated so much that in their mind, there is no more room for new pain. There is only room for new possibilities. Frankl said, when I was beaten down to the most bottom, stripped of my identity, head shaven and every body hair removed, given a tattoo and an old piece of prison uniform, I suddenly found myself realizing that I had no identity. I was not a doctor or a psychiatrist in this environment. I was one of the many people that they wanted to eliminate. And I wanted to live. I wanted to survive. I had a thought I wanted to bring to the world, which became logotherapy, a great construct that much of the world knew, heard, and benefited from. So he says, I decided to focus on the positive. He said the positive, and I'll close with this story. The story is basically, he talks about the time when he went from one death camp to another. I know it's morbid, but a death camp is a camp where they were exterminating these people. A work camp was where they kept you alive and farmed you out as labor. But Frankel said when he and a group of people were being sent to another camp, one of them peered through the slats on the railway car that they were being transported in and saw a bridge, and immediately morale sunk. Because bridge meant that they were going to cross over into another part and they were going to go to the ill-fated Mauthausen camp, which was a death camp. But then the train veered right. It detoured a little bit. And people peered to the other side and said, yay, we're not going over the Danube. We're not going over that bridge. So we're not going to that camp. And they chugged on for a little more. In that crowded compartment, they were happy that they had not been sent to a death camp. When they came to the new camp at Dachau and the doors opened, the guards started barking, just like you see in the movies. And the people who were huddled and cold and shivering suddenly looked up in that wintry sky. And there was a jubilation amongst the inmates, amongst the prisoners, amongst the Jews. And the jubilation was this camp had no chimneys. And I don't know what you know about Nazi Germany and all of the perils thereon, but a chimney meant that there was a crematorium. A crematorium meant that this is where they gassed and killed you. Imagine that. You're at the bottommost ebb of your survival. You've gone 3 days and 3 nights standing in a railway car because there was no place to sit. You're cold, you're drenched to the bone. You're standing outside in the elements as roll call is being taken place. And taken again because one person is missing. And someone smilingly looks at the environment and says, there are no chimneys. This is a good day. So folks, that's the message I had for you. Hopefully it was motivational enough. Hopefully it was informational enough. Thank you so much for giving me the privilege to come into your midst. I'm going to turn it back to the organizers and I'll stick around to answer any questions you may have of me. Thank you so much.
That was a fantastic flow of thoughts. And you have given a blueprint at the foundation. And the architectural plan was wonderful. If people wanted to be disciplined, and this plan not only gives the plan, but a lot of building material also you have provided. There's a lot of material. People have to only use and that blueprint and just make a construction. That was a wonderful talk. I know our leaders must be ready to ask questions. Let's just wait. Yes, please. We are available here for the next 15 minutes to answer to a question. May I request the participants to either you ask a question, unmuting your mic, or otherwise you can type in a chat box your question if you have any.
Yeah, Krish, this is Arijit from Mumbai. Yeah, it was really a crisp, and I really appreciate the way you have talked about plan. Yeah, of course, preparation is vital, as you rightly said. But I just like to add whether determination and desire is also an important factor in the doing the preparation.
And you said your name was Abhijit?
Arijit.
Arijit. Okay. Yeah, you stumbled on something, but let me put it this way. The will to win, desire, is nothing without the will to prepare to win, discipline. So the will to win is nothing without the will to prepare to win. An athlete who wants to win still has to train. A writer who wants to publish a manuscript still needs an editor to edit the manuscript. So the will to win, the desire, has to have a determination behind the desire. That's fine. But before that, you have to have the discipline to engage. So the way we quote it is the will to win, which is your desire, is nothing without the will to prepare to win, which is the discipline. The determination is nothing more than discipline on steroids. Determination comes after you have discipline and you start having some wins under your belt. Let me explain that. A person who wants to start running to become healthy, day one may be able to jog a little bit, run a little bit, walk a little bit, then jog a little bit. Day two may be able to do it a little more as that fine tuning comes into. By the time they get to the point where they're running every week, there will come a time when if they don't run, they feel bad.
Okay.
But initially, when you start running, you feel bad. There'll come a point if you're a regular person who exercises, when you don't exercise, you'll feel bad. So that determination is what keeps that desire and the discipline going. hopefully that triad made sense.
Okay. Secondly, you have spoken about the activity. Activity, it speaks about your actions, like it is similar to your actions.
Activity is yeah. So actions are basically nothing more than a result. I mean, behaviors and actions are, the reason I separate that is activity is usually planned, actions are usually spontaneous.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Krish.
People can even type their questions if you have any. Yeah, Mr. Rajendra Kumar Palakurt is asking, Krish, his question is how to overcome procrastination.
Yeah, this it's one of the great questions. How do you overcome procrastination? And by this, I would encourage you to, when you set a goal, which is nothing more than a format that will help you, the way to overcome procrastination is the things you want to do in this world. Basically, classify them into three categories. Categorize the first as short term, which is these are things that if you do, you right now, you'll get immediate benefit. So if it means that today I'm going to take a walk, I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk around, and I'm going to come back, that'll give you immediate benefit that day. You'll feel better that day. You may hurt a little bit, but you'll have done good for you. Whatever it is, if you want to write something that day. So the reason I say that is you have to have some short-term activities which will give you immediate gratification. And these may be anything that you want to accomplish in 2 months or less. Some of the things you want to do have to be accomplished in 2 months or less. Those are short-term priorities. 2 months to 2 years is what we call medium range. And long range is beyond 2 years. Now, the reason I classified that is most people procrastinate because they believe that no good is coming by starting because they look at the whole elephant. The only way to overcome procrastination is realize that you don't look at the end of the process while you're still in the middle of the process. Don't look at the end of the process while you're still in the middle of the process, and realize this: the food you eat on the mountaintop of accomplishment is only grown in the valley of disappointment. Nothing grows on the mountaintop. The food you eat on the mountaintop is only grown in the valley. So the best way to overcome procrastination is practice the principle of, I'm going to focus on the ripples in my life. I'll let the tsunamis take care of themselves. I'll give you a quick story. Henry Morton Stanley, who wrote the 2-volume epic Livingstone of Africa, was sent to Africa to find David Livingstone as word from him began seeded, and people did not know where Dr. Livingstone was. Henry Morton Stanley was asked the question, were you afraid to go into the Congo? He says, not really. I took my machete and I hacked the weeds 3 feet in front of me. Then 3 feet in front of that, I killed the poisonous snake. Then 3 feet in front of that, I removed another obstacle. After I removed enough obstacles 3 feet in front of me, suddenly I found myself in the heart of Africa. So in order to overcome procrastination, find small things that you can win. When you put that win under your belt and you get excited, amazing things will happen. So.
Thank you, Krish, for that explanation. Thank you.
That was so crisp and powerful suggestion, Krish. Maybe generally people look at the big goal which they have set for a long time, and unless they achieve, they feel that they could not. Probably a very small achievement and small successes manifest more success. Wonderful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Sunil Kumar saying, good evening, Krish. I felt constructive discipline is very crucial, especially in the smart generation like Gen Z. Those may not work for new generation. How do you work on it?
Well, that's a very interesting question in the way it's phrased. But every generation has had a group of people who were better than the generation at large. When I look at the people younger than the age of 40, these are the people who we are calling the generation behind us who are having to be taught stuff and all that. But they are the people who gave us all of the greatest innovations that we now enjoy. So every generation has had a 20% people, even the Gen Z. We look at them in a broader construct saying they may not want discipline and all, but the 3, 4, 5, 6 people that I talk to, in every generation I have met go-getters. They are always considered outliers to their own generation, but history has always considered them mavericks when history is written. So every generation has effective people. Now, the discipline methods may not work for the new generation because of the way incentive is perceived. And that comes in a very different way. When we look at incentivizing this generation, they are no longer incentivized like we would think. And I found this out the hard way. There was a study done, and the study said that when employees left employment and the managers were asked, why do you think the employees left? 10 out of 10 managers said they went for more money. But when the employees who left were asked the question, only 1 out of 10 said it was money. 9 out of 10 said they just wanted to be recognized. They wanted to be accepted. This one thing I know, discipline, if it is given to you as a sacrifice, everybody will resist it. Discipline, if it is offered as an incentive, everybody will embrace it. But it has to be done in this way. Hear me carefully. I tell people this: if you have to criticize the performance, but praise the performer so they can fight another day. The Gen Z especially is a generation that did not have the ability in a majority of cases where both parents were around all the time. They had helicopter parenting, they had lawnmower parenting, and in most cases in Gen Z, both parents worked. So one of the things they are looking for, not so much discipline as much as they are looking for camaraderie, effectiveness, hope, that when they get married, when they have children, when they raise families, that there can be some more togetherness. And a lot of these people are actually fighting the loneliness of their own childhood and all that. And I agree. I mean, each country is different. But for a large majority, as I've traveled around the world, now we have both parents working in most homes. And as a result of that, the children, their discipline is slightly different. And I don't discipline them through schedule. I offer it as an incentive to be motivated. I actually mentor a bunch of younger kids. And when their parents ask them, why do you listen to this uncle and not to us? They all say the same thing. They say, he looks like you guys, but he talks like us. So, how to do multitasking without diluting the work that's going on. How to multitask. This is a good question. And in fact, I would recommend I get you a better answer than I would. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Shelly, who's in my office, actually answer the question. And then I'll try to provide it back to you guys in a written way when she gets back, when I get back to the US on Monday and she gets back from a trip. You're saying, wait, that's a roundabout way. No, the answer is she's brilliant at this than I am. She's a multitasker, I'm not. I'm a creator, she's an executor. Now, if you want to do multitasking, you have to ask yourself, are you a creator or are you an executor? If you're a creator and you come up with a bunch of ideas and you're getting into multitasking because of that, you're going to fail at all of them. But if you come up with a bunch of ideas and you have an executor on your team who's only not going to worry about your ideas, but going to worry about getting them done, then you have a cohesive. So I'm going to have Shelly answer the question from the quantitative aspect. And I think my qualitative and her quantitative would help you better. All right.
Your device is muted.
Krish, one more question before that.
Yeah.
How to avoid multiple things coming in my way when I have planned something else for the day?
You have to see who it's coming from. If it's virtual, I have a very simple system of gauging. I ask myself, is it critical or urgent? to respond to this. Urgent means if their request, if I don't respond, the world as we know it will shut down, the company as we know it will end. Which means 99.9 things that come across your desk are critical, they're not urgent, which means the world is not going to end if you don't respond to them right away. Second, if the email I get does not have a subject heading in which I can guess what the gist of the email is, I put it on the back burner for 4 hours later. And I have a discipline, I go back to it 4 hours later. You're saying, why? I said, if you didn't think enough about the work you were assigning me to at least give it a category that when I saw it at face value, I knew what you were talking about. It's not important to you. It's not important to me. So when work comes to me, you have to be able to put your thoughts in the heading. I have people when I train now, when they talk to me, they don't send me an email. They just send me in the subject heading. Only 2 lines and I know what they want. No rambling on. So that's it. First, critical or urgent. If it's majority is critical, it's not, I mean, it's urgent, it's not critical. I have a 24-hour turnaround on any task I accept in terms of either feedback loop saying I'm capable, or some kind of messaging saying I'm incapable, or a message saying I need help to get it to the next level. I gave it an initial stab. Any task you accept from anybody, the person who gives you the task should know whether you want one of 3 things, whether you want to be trained on it, whether you want someone or yourself to be transferred from it, or you want it to be terminated. They need to know that up front. Otherwise, you're wasting the valuable time of 2 people. Now, that's from personnel multitasking. Regular multitasking is based on what is called blocks of time. I have 4 blocks of time in every day, and any task that I take or comes my way has to fall into one of these 4. Otherwise, I'll ask the person who sent it or the people. The first is it superior task, which means is it coming from above, which means my reporting up to them now enables them to look better in their circles. Second is peer task, which means is it coming from a parallel source, and as a result of that, we're contributing as a team. Third is personnel task, is a result of something I imposed on myself that I bit off more than I can chew. I wanted to do something during lunch. And fourth is familial task. Does this affect the broader outcome of whether does it come from family or does it affect my family by taking up more time? So any task that comes to me, I put it into one of these 4 buckets, and it's not a perfect science. Now, if you want to get good time management, I'm going to give you the best principle ever. Every day, whether you're at home or at work, hybrid, whatever, show up 10-15 minutes early for your task. And most of you will notice I was the first person on the call. I usually am. I show up 10 minutes before for whatever I'm asked to do. But in life, show up 15 minutes early for whatever you're asked to do. Stay 15 minutes late if you can. Spend 15 minutes less at your breaks, and spend 15 minutes less in meaningless stuff. That's 1 hour a day. That's 5 a week. That's 20 a month. That's 250 a year. That's 6 additional weeks.
So you saved a lot of time now.
Yeah.
Krish,
And
last
then,
very important question I would like to ask, if I take 2 more minutes of your time. Mr. Nazmul is asking, his question is how to handle a past baggage, which sometimes acts as a barrier to be effective. And you will find this with many leaders too.
Sure. And baggage comes in 2 forms. It can be professional baggage or personal baggage, but it always has a chronology. So when something has happened in the past that messed you up, you considered yourself the person who got messed up. In the present, you're thinking about it. And the present is where we set goals for the future. So when you arrive in tomorrow, you didn't set any goals because you were thinking about yesterday's baggage. That person messed you up once, so that activity messed you up once, and you're carrying it 3 times over. In Humanity 101, we say, unless you forgive, you will never be able to forget. So if that baggage was negative, forgive. Try to find a way to reconcile, try a way to heal. If it was a project that went bad, find new ways, but forgive yourself and the team for the fact that you all did not hit mark at that point, because you cannot carry. Remember, yesterday's headlines will always be blotted out by today's traffic jams. Don't worry about tomorrow because it'll bring its own problems. You have to settle the score. So forget it and drive on. Forgive before you can forget, and that should be able to help you.
Thank you so much, Krish. That was a really wonderful time. In fact, we forgot to look at our watches too. And if you are permitting, we would like to take at least 2 more hours time, but still it will be less. I know we need to have a very quality time with our leaders too.
Sure.
If possible, we would
things-
like to invite.
Yeah, one of
Yeah.
the things I usually suggest, because the Q&A is robust, when I go back to the US, we can coordinate. And I usually, for a lot of leaders, I do a follow-up session, which is just Q&A. It's just interaction. There's no talk. And that becomes easier. We get more accomplished.
That actually the document that you wish to forward, if you can do that, I'll share with all our leaders.
Sure.
I have already sent a mail to you, Krish.
Okay. And I'm going to, yeah, all right. And I'll send, I'll have Taikika send you that right away. So, all right.
Sure. Thank you so much, Krish. Thanks is a very small word for you too. Accepting our invitation, the short notice. Thanks, Anand, for bringing Krish on this platform. And in fact, you added more value to this platform and you added our day two today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.